What's going on, everybody? Nick here. So I've been using ChatGPT and really the whole GPT suite of models since 2019, way back with GPT-2, and I've used them in every single business since. So as I'm sure you can imagine, I've compiled a big list of tips and techniques that enable me to get the most out of my prompts. What I want to do in today's video is talk about what those are. So I'm going to be sharing 3 ChatGPT prompt engineering hacks that are going to help take your prompts to the next level. They're also going to help you get away from just simply copying and pasting prompts and outputs to and from the ChatGPT window, which I think a lot of businesses are unfortunately limited to today. I'm going to help you position ChatGPT more as a component of your business, something that can work autonomously in the background while you're not around. So if that sounds like something you guys want to improve, learn how to do, and implement in your own companies, stay tuned and let's get into it. So I got a number of hacks for you. We're going to start with the ChatGPT window in and of itself, and I'm going to show you how to use ChatGPT outside of this little box as well using a no-code tool called make.com. But without further ado or fanfare, let's get into the very first prompt engineering hack, which is to transition to using structured data over unstructured data. This is by far the biggest hack. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys how to use 4 types of structured data specifically. The first being Markdown, the second being CSV, the third being XML, and the fourth being Json. And understanding each of these will also enable you to stack them on top of each other so that, instead of you just prompting once and then getting one output, you can prompt once and then get 20, 30, or even 50 outputs. That'll enable you to basically multiply your leverage with ChatGPT. So let's get into the first one. Let's get into Markdown. So what I have open here is I have the ChatGPT window. Many of you are very familiar with this by now. We're specifically using the ChatGPT 4.0 series of models. And hypothetically, my name is Peter and I run a peanut store and I want to come up with blog posts about peanuts, right? So maybe what I would say, the unenlightened Peter, I should say, would write something like, write me a story about peanuts. And as I'm sure you can imagine, ChatGPT does a pretty good job. It writes a story about peanuts. Wow, lovely. Ooh, Elias, thank you very much. Okay, great. So we got a cool story about peanuts. Maybe what we want to do is we want to, take this and then use it to update a Google Doc with the whole story. So this is my story. And we got to write the title, obviously. So Peanuts in Groundswell, a story. The change. Maybe a single golden peanut plant. Maybe we want to add some image. I'm just adding a bunch of additional formatting and context because, I'm just trying to take this blog post to the next level. In conclusion, right? Okay, cool. So we've now done a tiny bit of work to turn the output of ChatGPT into something that maybe we can actually put on our blog, right? So what we do now is maybe we're on WordPress or maybe we're on Webflow or something. We just copy this puppy and then paste it in. This is how the vast majority of business owners are currently using ChatGPT. And while it's still faster than what we were doing before, you're missing a great opportunity to multiply your leverage using structured data. So what we're going to talk about first is Markdown formatting. And what I'm going to do is I'll show you rather than tell you. If instead of just saying, write me a story about peanuts like this, I say, write me a story about peanuts, except use Markdown, ATX format, vary formatting, and make it interesting. Let's just do that. What you'll see is before, what we got when we prompted was we got text. That's one level of data. Now what we get when we prompt is we get text, but we also get hierarchy. We get headings. We get subheadings, we get quotes, we get chapter headings, we get subheadings, we get bullet points, lists, we get basically everything. Now, if I copy this and I paste this in, so you could see, oops, sorry, I copied the code. I should actually copy the whole story up here. I'm just going to go all the way down here. Now we actually get a fully formatted story that's basically good to go from the get-go. So why did I show you this example first? Because the vast majority of people are only prompting ChatGPT and then getting one thing. They're only getting the data that they asked for. But ChatGPT inherently understands formatting and understands structure. What you can do is you can actually save yourself a ton of time by getting it to output structured data that includes the formatting instead. So next time, instead of you just, getting a story and copying and pasting it into a window, have it actually generate something in a format that enables you to go one step deeper and actually, generate headings, generate subheadings, generate quotes, and that sort of thing. If you guys want to learn more about Markdown formatting, there's this great cheat sheet from the Markdown guide, guys. And basically what Markdown formatting is instead of just outputting like the text that we were doing, it's actually outputting text plus a layer of hierarchy on top of it. So for instance, if I go back to my document, this is the title, right? Let's go down here. Let's say I wanted to add a new heading. Well, what I'd do is I'd write $ space, and then it would turn into a heading. $ space is a heading 2. $ space, heading 3. If I wanted to quote something, or maybe a bold something, I just wrap it in these little asterisks, right? I think if I were to underline before and after, it'll italicize. So I'm not going to teach you guys everything about Markdown formatting. All I'm going to show you guys, or all I mean to do here, is just give you guys a gateway drug into the value of adding additional structure to your text and not just making it like, text in, text out sort of deal, but actually having it generate something a little more interesting. Cool. So that's Markdown formatting. Let's talk a little bit about the next rung up on the ladder, which is CSV. Let's pretend that I have a simple tasks. Let's make a new Google Sheet. And I want to, generate like a list of video game characters. What most people will do is they'll use a level 1 prompt like this. Generate me a list of video game characters with names, skills, let's say physical descriptions, etc. What it'll do is it'll output me this list. Rook Ashburn, cybernetic mercenary, Ilara Thornvale, right? And what I want to do is, I basically have to copy and paste this in, right? Rook Ashburn, he's a role. He's a cybernetic mercenary. His skill is he's dual wielding pistols and all this stuff. And, I go through this whole process and it takes me a freaking hour just to like make this spreadsheet. Well, what's really cool is if you use structured data in the form of a CSV or a comma separated value file, you can save yourself a ton of time. If instead of this, I'm just going to get the same prompt, open up a new window, just because I don't want that previous prompt to be influencing this. I'll say, generate me a list of video game characters in CSV format. I'm pasting this into a Google Sheet. Use columns like name, skill, physical descriptions, etc. A couple more. I'm just going to have it go ahead and generate me something. All right, and what we see here is it looks like it's generating actually like real characters like Lara Croft and Geralt of Rivia and so on and so forth. So you'll notice that it's doing so in a very specific format. This format is dissimilar from what we had before, where we had like that nice structure to it, right? What we have now is we have this little 3-letter acronym up top, CSV. And what we're getting is a list that's basically more or less written in a very particular format that Google Sheets and other spreadsheet tools just understand intuitively. So if I take this now and I just copied it all, and if I just paste this in, okay, you'll see that it's all just sort of on one column. But if you go to data and then you go split text to columns, voila, you've just made yourself a spreadsheet and you've done it in like 2 seconds. So as I'm sure you can imagine, for business purposes, this might be great. For storytelling purposes, this might be great. For teaching purposes, this might be great. But you can actually go one step further than this. If instead of this, we generate another prompt and we say, generate me a list of video game characters in CSV format. Let's just do 10 for now. And then we say, output the data as a CSV file I can upload. And then we press enter. What ChatGPT will do now is it'll actually go in and then it will basically write a big code library. First, it's going to write down the characters, of course, Doomslayer being the goat. And then it's going to give us a file that we can download. Let me just close this. And the cool part is now we have a file that we can download. Well, now we can, pretend that this is just totally new. We just go File, Import, Upload, and drag and drop this. The variety of settings here, I'm just going to use append to current sheet. And then voila, we have the same data basically that we had previously. We just have it nice and structured and, in a file format. So I show you these two simple ways to add structured data to your workflow because I just want you guys to understand, if you're unfamiliar with a lot of the technical tools out there, if you don't know how to use this practically in your business, these are basically like the gateway drugs to better and higher levels of structured data. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you guys sort of the back end. I'll show you guys how to use this stuff in actual business applications using a simple no-code tool called make.com. So make.com, as I'm sure you guys know if you watch my channel with any regularity, is probably one of the most powerful and simplest and easy tools to get up and running with this stuff as humanly possible. You just drag and drop a bunch of modules, and there's built-in support for these artificial intelligence workflows. So if I go to OpenAI and then go create a completion or create a prompt, what I can do is, instead of having to interact with ChatGPT through, this window here, and having to, go on their website and sort of deal with the limitations of formatting, I can actually create the exact same prompt, but I can do it inside of this module window. So for instance, if I go back to my previous prompt about peanuts, okay, I say, write me a story about peanuts. I'm just copying and pasting this prompt. And then I add a user prompt with the message content, write me a story about peanuts. And then if I run this, what's happening is I'm now bypassing the ChatGPT website, and I'm outputting, or I'm creating, I'm having it generate text directly. And so I just asked it to generate me a story about peanuts, and now we have this data basically accessible to us using, this no-code tool, which I can then, let's say I wanted to do that other example, create a Google Doc, right? I just could create a Google Doc, create a document. I say this, or peanut story, let's say, and then I just paste this in. And sorry, I'm just so fast sometimes. It bugs out. Okay, so now we're creating a story, and we're actually just having it create the Google Doc for me automatically, as opposed to me having to do that copy and pasting bollocks that I was doing before. So the Google Doc will have a little link next to it. This link will look like this. And what we've done now is we basically just created a simple flow that enables us to automatically and procedurally generate Google Docs using some prompt. As you could imagine, this can be extraordinarily valuable. You don't just have to stop at Google Docs. Maybe you wanted to hook this up to your WordPress. You could do that very easily. Maybe you wanted to do the same thing for, Webflow, Wix, right? Maybe Squarespace. Wherever the hell your website is hosted, there's a way for you to automatically add content to that. Now, the real value in this comes when you stack multiple layers of structured data together. So what I want to talk about next, I want to talk about a simple way to generate structured data using XML. XML stands for Extensible Markup Format. Extensible Markup Language. The value in XML is, instead of you just outputting one thing, so instead of you just asking it to write a story and then having it output a story, you can ask it to output a story, but then you can also have it output a bunch of additional data alongside that story. So not just the story, but you can have it output a specific variable called title, another variable called excerpt, maybe another one called summary, maybe another one called keywords, another one called, let's say you're a teacher. Maybe every story you generate, you want to have a list of questions to ask little kids at your class. Hey, what was the theme? What's the moral of the story? What are some things that the main character could have done differently? Basically, you can convert what we had previously into an extraordinarily simple data structure that allows you to just use it in actual business applications. So if you've never used XML before, this is a very quick and easy example, but essentially, this is like a catalog. In the month of spring, we have a title called Garden Sales. Then we have a line in our catalog called Outdoor Tools. Then we have a new page with the caption, Goodbye Winter, with two items. One's gardening gloves, the other's potting soil. This is XML format, and it may look a little bit scary to you if you've never used it before. This is another example for like a hospital. Right? Name, first John, last Fisher, visit number 2, date, whatever, problems, headache. If you've never used anything like this, it might be a little bit intimidating for you, but I'm going to walk you through what this process looks like, and then I'll show you how to stack this with the Markdown approach that we were using previously. So, okay, we're currently outputting just text, right? But why don't we open up this prompt here? Instead say, write me a story about peanuts, output in XML format. Use the following structure. What we want is we want it to output a story. Inside of the story, we want a title. Then we want the text. Actually, we want the excerpt. Let's do that. It'll be easier. Then we want the keywords. Maybe we want to generate a bunch of keywords. Then we want the text. Then we want questions for kids even. Then what else do we want? We want current date, maybe. I'm just trying to think of anything else that might be interesting. Title, excerpt, keywords, text, questions for kids, current date, maybe like author bio or something. Cool. Make something up for author bio. We'll go back here and then we'll go here. Awesome. So now I'm going to have it generate this and output our XML. And let me just show you how much more data we are capable of getting than just the text. Okay, so if we just think about this logically, previously what we did when we said, write me a story about peanuts, is we gave it one prompt to give us one answer, right? It wrote me the story about peanuts. But now we're saying, write me a story about peanuts, and it's generating us tons of different data types. It's generating us a title, Then it generates us an excerpt. It generates us a list of keywords. It generates us the whole story. Then it generates us questions. Then it generates us the date. It generates us an author bio that's fictional. As you can imagine, if you want to use this in any sort of business or enterprise or industrial application, when you have ChatGPT generate you this data in this structured way, you can now do things with all of this different data. I mean, if you think about it previously, you might have had a staff member in your business, or maybe you're doing this yourself, who would be tasked with generating content using ChatGPT and then having to manually paste it in every freaking time to like a WordPress thing. Well, now what you can do is you can generate all of the fields for this and then automatically connect to WordPress to upload it for you. So this can save you a ton of time. You can basically automate most of, I want to say, like a simple content business or a marketing business just using flows like this. So let me show you how to actually turn this into something useful in make.com. It's pretty simple. Now that we outputted this XML, there are a couple things we need to do. The first thing we need to do is we just need to get rid of this, whatever these three little tags are. Well, actually, no, not necessarily. Let me just go over here to XML. And what we need to do is we just need to parse the XML. I'm going to not do any data structure. I'll just feed this in. What parsing refers to is parsing just turns it from a format that includes those little tags into one that we can understand and interact with more readily using computers. So, sorry, we received an error there, probably because we outputted these three little backticks. Yeah, we outputted these three little backticks. If you say, right at an XML, if you ask ChatGPT to generate you something that's structured data, in the top left-hand corner, you see how there's these three little letters here, this acronym that says XML. This is just ChatGPT's own language, basically, that they use to show you what language the code is in. So that's what these three little backticks are for. If you're trying to use XML or Json, like I'm going to be talking about in any other application, you have to get it not to output that. So don't output any back XML. Your first character should be this. All right. We're going to run this again now, and it's not going to generate us those backticks. We're then going to feed it into this XML module. And if I click on this XML module, you'll see that now we have the data structured in a way that matters. Title, excerpt, keywords, questions for kids, current date, author bio, right? You even have information about this author, which is pretty crazy. So you can do a number of things with this. You could send this data off to WordPress. You could create a Google Doc with it again, and that sort of thing. What I want to do now is I just want to show you how to stack this with the approach that we had earlier. Remember how earlier we were generating Markdown? Well, the text is no longer Markdown. So we're going to tell it text should be in Markdown ATX format. Now it's going to generate it in Markdown. In order to make Markdown work, what we need to do is we need to transform it into HTML. So let me just grab this text, transform it into HTML. Then I'm going to create a Google Doc that's going to have this HTML. And in terms of the title, we're just going to call it the actual title. And now let me run our whole flow, which is basically, if you think about it, like a content generator tool that takes as input ChatGPT, creates 5 or 6 different data types, parses the Markdown into a language that is just compatible with Google Docs. And this is sort of one of those, like, if you know things, and then creates the document in Google Docs. So if you think back to our very first example, we had to manually copy and paste this peanut story in. But if you think about what we're doing now is we're just generating all of this stuff automatically, and it's automatically inside of the Google Doc. It's automatically formatted the way you want to, and that sort of thing. The title is customized, right? We can automatically pull that title without having to do any sort of shenanigans. There's just a lot more leverage this way. We're just making one prompt, and that prompt is now doing 10 things for us as opposed to just one thing. Okay, so in a similar vein to XML, we also have another cool data type, which is called Json. Json is very similar to XML. It's just instead of what we had earlier, let me just show you an example here. Instead of this, as you see here, what we do is we use a format that relies off curly braces. So you see how this title says title, The Adventures of Percy the Peanut, close title? What we do now is we can actually save a few tokens. You can just go like that, right? That's equivalent. If you wanted to put the excerpt in there as well, you go excerpt. Then you'd go join Percy the Peanut on his journey through the farm. Wonderful. If you wanted keywords, right? There's other formats for this. This would probably be an array. And then inside of the array, you'd have peanut, adventure, farm, friendship. And, you can go so on and so forth. You can continue proceeding in that way before until you write the whole article. Now, I'm not going to do all this manually. I'm just going to get AI to do it because, I'm working with AI. I want AI to do something for me. I might as well have AI formulate my crap as well. So I'm just going to take this whole story as we know it. I'm going to go back to ChatGPT and I'm going to say, convert this from XML to JSON. I'm going to paste this in. This is now going to take the text and then just turn it into that beautiful JSON format that I showed you earlier. You'll notice that it's still using Markdown in order to create the text content. And it's added a couple of additional levels to us to the text, which typically just works a little better with JSON. But now our data is extraordinarily structured. It's not in that XML format, and it's definitely not in that text format. If I wanted to modify the actual source prompt, I would say, write me a story about peanuts, output in JSON, use the following structure. I'm going to go back here and say, put me a schema for this. Sorry, simpler. It should say, I don't know, like title, string. Schema, probably not the right term. I'm just looking for a simple value like this. Okay, great. So then I'm going to paste this in. We're going to say text should be in Markdown format. Make something for authobio. Don't output any JSON. Your first character should be a curly brace. Awesome. We're now just going to output this ChatGPT module one more time. And as you see, the text is now going to be nice and structured in JSON as opposed to XML. This is actually going to save us some tokens. That's one of the valuable reasons why people like using JSON as opposed to XML. Different models tend to work better with different things. So like Claude, for instance, tends to work better with XML just because that's how it was trained. ChatGPT tends to work better with JSON. Interesting how that works right now, huh? Anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to parse this JSON. Same idea. Basically, all of these no-code tools have a way that you can parse the data with. And then I'm just going to convert this same thing. We'll call this text into Markdown. And then I'm going to use the Markdown to create a Google Doc, same as before. In this way, we've now completely transformed the way that we were interacting with AI. And we've turned it from... I don't think this worked because I probably didn't feed in the right variable name, right? Yeah, sorry, I got to use story.text.content. So let's actually go back here and then go story.text.content. Anyway, what I was saying was now you're interacting with AI in probably like a 5 to 10 times as leveraged way. And then, if you start combining with no-code tools like make.com and so on and so forth, it becomes substantially more powerful. I think the reason why this wasn't popping up is because I don't have a variable called name. Yeah, I don't. So I needed to go to title here, which is underneath story. I'm going to run that a third time. As I'm sure you can imagine, there's a little bit of debugging that you need to do when you build a dedicated solution like this, but third time's the charm, guaranteed. There you go, mucking around. Thank you, Google Docs. And now our output is another lovely story with a bunch of structured data, including the title and the excerpt and the keywords and that sort of thing. The second prompt engineering hack I have for you is to use user assistant response pairs. Now, if you guys are unfamiliar with what I mean by user assistant response pairs, we just need to go back one more step, and we need to learn about some basically like academic terminology for how AI models output text. There are basically 3 types of prompts available today. There are 0-shot prompts, 1-shot prompts, and then like many-shot or few-shot prompts. Now, a 0-shot prompt is just when you have the AI model do something for you without giving it any examples of what you want it to do. This is the vast majority of prompts that I currently see. I run a community called Maker School and another one called Make Money with Make.com, where I help people do prompt engineering stuff like this for business applications, for clients, for their own companies, that sort of thing. And the number one issue I see with AI models, with the AI models that people are using, are that when they prompt them, they just say, hey, do this thing for me. The issue is when you just ask the AI to do something for you without giving it any examples, it just has to come up with everything on its own. It doesn't understand the guardrails for the prompt that you're asking for. It doesn't understand what is an appropriate output and so on and so forth. So I have a graph right over here. And as you guys can see, there are various lines on this graph. The blue line here is for 0-shot. The orange line is for 1-shot. And then the green line is for 32-shot, aka they provided 32 examples and then assessed accuracy. Accuracy is that vertical axis, and then parameters is the horizontal axis. You don't really need to worry about that. This just shows as models tend to get more intelligent, there becomes more of a difference between the examples you provide and the results that you get. Anywho, so what we're seeing if we average out these two blue lines is, if you provide a zero shot, these two models, OPT and GPT, they tended to work around 70% of the time. If you, on the other hand, provided one example, these two models started working like 73, 74% of the time. Then you provided 32 examples, they started working maybe 77, 78% of the time. So the really interesting part about this is the distance between 0 and 1 shot is approximately equivalent to the distance between 1 shot and 32 shot. And that should tell you something. Basically, the highest ROI or the biggest bang for your buck is just providing a single example. If you provide a single example, you will improve the quality of your output from your prompt by as much as if you provide an additional 31 examples, somewhere in that neighborhood anyway. Obviously, this is going to depend on exactly what it is that you are doing, what you're asking the model to do. And you have to take into account token considerations as well. You don't want to spend $1 million billion by having 32 prompts, 32 additional examples in every prompt. But this just goes to show how much value there is in making your prompt or turning all of your prompts from 0 shot into at least 1 shot. So that's my rule of thumb. Always include at least one example of what you want the model to do before you actually train it or have it run on your real data. So if you've never done any sort of like few shot prompting before, let me give you a quick example. I'm going to pretend that we have a task. Sanitize the following name. The task is, I send a lot of cold emails, right? As part of my business model. And I get a lot of the data from my cold emails from LinkedIn. The unfortunate thing about LinkedIn is the vast majority of people on that platform, for whatever freaking reason, tend to put emojis in their names. So they'll say, Nick Sarayev, microbiologist, PhD, whatever. And then they'll have like a little bunch of emojis about microscopes and stuff. So let me actually just show you an example of this. We'll put a microscope here. We'll say PhD. We'll do something like that. So, a lot of names look like this. Let's say what I want is I want it to output my name in Json. Or if I just say sanitize the following name, it's going to return as Nick S. I don't want it as Nick S. But hypothetically, let's say sanitize the following name. And then what I do, is I go Nick Sarayev PhD, maybe input, output. First name, Nick. Last name, Sarayev. And I give it an example of what I want it to do. And then I say, Peter Withings, CEO. Maybe I add, you can learn a lot about somebody just based off their quick pick emoji tool, huh? Anyway, so this is the next input. Now I'm going to send it and we're going to see what the output is. And voila. Right? I don't like the fact that it said, here's the sanitized output. So maybe what I'm going to do now is I'll say this. And maybe we have another example. Maybe it's Sarah Connor. Right? Now maybe we just go output. And now it's just going to generate me the JSON. If we take this and put this in like a business application, I'm sure you guys can see the more examples they provide, the closer and closer and closer it gets to what we want. You can then start adding the examples that are produced into the input of the next example. But as we proceed in this way, I'm sure you guys could tell, AI tends to get smarter and more accurate and better. Just like that few shot prompt graph showed earlier, where basically the more examples that you provide, the higher up it gets in terms of accuracy. As I'm sure you guys can imagine, right? I'm just prompting this manually through ChatGPT. If I were to use a procedural tool like I had here, it gets a lot easier. And this is where I start getting into user assistant response pairs. So sanitize the following name. As you see in ChatGPT's API, the way that you do this is you tell the model whether or not this is a user prompt or an assistant prompt. So this is a user prompt. This is me. It's me saying sanitize the following name. What you can do though, is in the API, you can simulate the responses from the assistant to have it act as if you produced some sort of output. So I'm going to provide, actually, I'm going to do this in 2 steps. We'll go user. That's where you tell the model what you want it to do. Then you go user, and then you provide it the actual input. And then everything after that is just a user assistant response pair. Okay. So look at how streamlined and clean this is now. Now, if I go down and add one more user prompt, and then I add this Sarah Connor thing, it will be perfect basically every time. first name, last name, Connor, right? As I'm sure you can imagine, you could add some data source at the beginning of this flow, have it just feed a bunch of names, and then have AI automatically add those names to a spreadsheet or something. Really, the sky is limitless here with structured data and user assistant response pairs in ChatGPT. All right, the last but most important prompt engineering hack is to test and iterate your prompts. The vast majority of the time when people come up with a prompt for ChatGPT, the way that they do it is they'll prompt and then it'll output something and they'll be like, I don't really like this. And then it'll change it a little bit. And they'll be like, I want it more like this. And then it'll change it again and so on and so on and so forth until you have what you want. The issue is that's not really reproducible from a business perspective, right? You can't actually take that and then use that out to build out a system or use that to, create one of those autonomous sort of worker bees in your company. If you were to copy and paste that whole prompt into something like make.com or some other no-code tool, the number of tokens you would use would be crazy. And it's also just not a very reliable way to get the result you want. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you a much more reliable way that'll allow you to test your data constantly so that basically what we're going to do is you're going to design a test set. And then you're going to score every prompt on the basis of how many positive results you got from the test set. So maybe the first run around, you get 65%. The second run, you get 70%. The third run after you change your prompt again, you get 80%. The fourth run after you change your prompt again, you get 90%, right? Eventually you reach a point where you're satisfied and then you can stop. But what I'm going to do here is, pretend that we have a simple task. The task is we're going to feed in as input an icebreaker. Sorry. We're going to feed in as input a LinkedIn bio. Okay. I'll say, give me 5 example LinkedIn bios in the form LinkedIn bio goes here. And what I want to do is I just want to create a customized DM that I could send to people and then use that DM. Basically, like I can source the customization of the DM from the LinkedIn bio. What I mean by that is if the LinkedIn bio says, I'm passionate about innovation and leadership and creating high value in high stakes environments or something along those lines, I want our customization to say something like, hey, Peter, I know you're really passionate about innovation. That's really important to me too. I care a lot about providing high value to things. Thought I'd just send you a quick message. The idea is we just want to source information from some publicly available data source, have AI rewrite that for us in some way that matters. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to get the data myself. And what I want to do is just use that data as part of my training set. So I'm going to go over here. And the specifics of how I'm building this out aren't super important. So you don't need to know how to parse the JSON or whatever. Just know that I'm finding a list, or I'm creating basically a list of these LinkedIn bios right now. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to iterate through this list of LinkedIn bios. The value here being that after I iterate through them, I'm going to feed them into AI, and I'm going to have AI, create me an icebreaker. So I'm going to say, use the provided LinkedIn biography to write a customized one-line introduction in JSON format. I'm going to say, generate me 2 more. These are just going to be my examples. So I'm then going to use my training data, which will look like this. And then I want follow the format, loved X, reminds me of Y, thought I'd reach out. This tends to be a good format to use for this sort of thing. So what we want is we want to output an icebreaker. I want to say, loved hearing about your AI experience, reminds me of my own company. I work at my own company, left click. Thought I'd reach out. Awesome. This is now like a customized LinkedIn DM, basically. We're going to do the same thing for this exact same idea. Just going to go over here. Then I'll say loved learning about your work with analytics. Reminds me of the dashboard I set up for a project last month. Thought I'd reach out. Awesome. Okay. And now the last thing we're going to do is we are just going to feed in the LinkedIn bio of an actual example, and we're going to have it output, the examples procedurally. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you guys a quick way to take this data and then use it to score progress over time. So I'm going to make a new sheet. I'm just going to call this, let's say, prompt tracker. I'm going to have 3 columns in the spreadsheet. One's input, the other's going to be output, and the other's going to be pass. What I'm going to do is I'm going to connect the spreadsheet to my make.com flow. And what the idea of this is, I have to find this, so just give me one sec. Prompt tracker. The idea of the spreadsheet is I'm going to provide the input, which is here. I'm then going to provide the output as well, which is going to be here. And then in the pass column, what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to manually go through it and then just rate whether or not it's good or not, whether or not it's what I want. So don't mind the bolding, and don't mind the fact that this is in Json here when realistically it doesn't need to be. If the input is this profile and the output is this, am I happy with it? Let's say yes. If the input is this profile and the output is this, am I happy with this? No. If the input is this and the output's that, am I happy with it? Let's say yes, let's say no, and let's say yes. All you need to do now in order to figure out quantifiably and quantitatively whether or not this prompt is all right is just count up the number of passes. Did this output the thing that I wanted to output, right? So maybe we have another column here called prompt, and maybe we have score, and then score is just 1, 2, 3 out of 5. So 3 out of 5 is also 60%, right? The prompt that I used in this specific case, I'm just going to copy and paste this from here. And it scored 60%, which is pretty reasonable. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to change a prompt, and then I'm just going to run it again. And then if it scores better, I'll know that my prompt is probably better. If it scores worse, I'll know my prompt is probably worse, right? I'm actually doing this with data. Granted, I'm only doing this with 5 rows. If you really wanted to be super, super consistent and precise about it, you'd probably do it with like 500 rows. Well, no, I think realistically a good middle ground is like 10, maybe 15. But as I'm sure you guys can see, we can now quantifiably test and iterate on our prompts. And we do so with like science, basically, instead of just trying something. Thought I'd reach out. Why don't we say, make the prompts engaging. Nice. These look a lot better already. So maybe now it's Y, 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 X. And now what I know is that my score is 80%, right? Let me just score this specific prompt, right? And over that time, as you go on, maybe now you have another 5 and another 5 and another 5, and it goes from 80 to 85 to 90 to 95. By the time you end up with like your final prompt, you will have quantifiably determined that it is the best prompt for the job. So I understand that, what I built out here is very simple. And I also understand that if you don't have experience with make.com, maybe it looks a little more complicated, or maybe it just doesn't look super relevant to you. But you don't need to have experience with any sort of tool in order to build out a spreadsheet like this. You can just do this yourself. You can do this using the ChatGPT window. There are basically many ways to iterate on these prompts. The last thing I'll leave you guys with is if you guys want a really good prompt engineering guide, head over to anthropic.com and then just go to prompt engineering over here. I'll include a link in the description. This is a high quality prompt engineering overview and doesn't talk about all the same things that I talked about. I think I talk about things that are a little bit more relevant and maybe a little bit more universally understandable, but it does dive really deep into the various ways that you can manipulate prompts using things like chain of thought, using things like multiple prompting. They probably talk about prompt caching here. They talk about pre-fills to basically improve the quality of your output. So once you have a spreadsheet sort of like this, where you're scoring things, if you implement the tips and tricks that are talked about in this Anthropic prompt engineering article, instead of being stuck at maybe 80 to 90%, which is probably the peak where most people can realistically get AI to, you'll be able to push past that, go all the way up to 95, 96, 97, hell, maybe even like 99% or more. The likelihood that you'll get to 100 is pretty low. The benefit of AI is that it's flexible, but AI's flexibility is also its biggest drawback. If you think about it, like, accuracy of a calculator is 100, but flexibility of a calculator is like 0, right? You can't ask a calculator, hey, make me a meal plan for the next week. It's not going to do a good job. You can ask AI it. So, if you think about like I don't know, like a graph with calculators on one end and then AI on the other end. Those are basically the two diametrically opposed things. You trade off a little bit of accuracy for flexibility, and that's just sort of how AI works. I hope you guys appreciated the video. I had a lot of fun putting it together. This is actually the 4th time that I'm recording it because the first 3 times my OBS kept on crashing. So rip on that, but it is what it is. If you guys have any questions, just drop them down below. I get most of my video ideas from you at this point in time. And I believe this video is actually because somebody asked me to do one on prompt engineering 3, maybe 4 weeks ago. So that's that. I can do that for your idea as well. Otherwise, please like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff that pumps me up. Join Maker School or makemoneywithmake.com. We just hit over 500 people in Maker School, and I'm continuing to obviously increase the price to represent the increased demand. So if you want to get in at a low price, definitely get in now. And yeah, I'll just catch you on the next video. Thanks so much.